Well, the peso was crushed once again today after the Mexican president decided to cancel a meeting with President Trump. Now, this is just another example of Trump's Twitter boiling over into real-world diplomacy. Now, President Peña Nieto was expected to visit the U.S. next week. They were going to discuss immigration and trade issues, but President Trump tweeted out that the meeting should be canceled if Mexico won't agree to pay for the wall. So then the Mexican president tweeted back in Spanish that they had alerted the White House that they would not be attending the meeting. Well, not to be outdone, the White House said today that they endorsed a 20% tax on all Mexican imports to the United States. And the White House spokesman Sean Spicer said this is just one example of the way that Mexico will pay for the wall. They said the 20% tax on annual Mexican imports would raise about $10 billion a year. That would easily pay for a border wall that's estimated to be only between $8 and $20 billion. So, David, a lot of people are saying that Donald Trump underestimated the Mexican president, but I think possibly they might have underestimated Trump.
I think Donald Trump holds the Trump cards here. He holds all the cards. Basically, 80% of Mexican trade is with the United States. So they really have more pressure on them to come to the table, especially since they have a massive surplus and have had since NAFTA was passed. When NAFTA was passed 23 years ago, we'd had rough equivalency. Then it immediately went to $15 billion surplus for Mexico, has never gotten smaller than that. In recent years, it's been between 60 and 75 billion. So he says a 20% tax, yeah, that would work out to $12 billion. If it's 75 billion, like it was just a couple of years ago, that'd be $15 billion in 1 year. But Leanne, I think the thing that's being missed here is that this is being portrayed in the media as a Twitter war between the two of them. The person who threw down the gauntlet, and I have to say that what Nieto said before Donald Trump came back and said, well, hey, if you don't want to build the wall, don't even come to the meeting. I want to read for you what Nieto said in his speech. It's absolutely amazing, and it is nothing less than a declaration of war against the United States. Understand that if you're going to have a massive immigration without the permission of the country involved, you're going to send foreign citizens into the country and demand that they get services like education and other things, and then work with your consulates to say, we're going to make sure that they get what they want, that they fill out the paperwork. We're going to help them fill out the paperwork so they can stay here and so forth and so on. We're going to protect our citizens' rights in your country. Understand that when you don't want assimilation here, when you maintain that they're going to be your citizens and you're going to move forward with this is nothing than an invasion, outright war. Let me read you what he had to say. He said, Mexico's has 50 consulates in the United States. They will become true ramparts in defense of migrant rights. In other words, we're going to use our 50 consulates, one in each state. We're going to use them like forts in our immigration invasion. He goes on to say, whenever a Mexican migrant is at risk and needs our help, we must be there. His or her country must be there. In other words, they're not American citizens. They're Mexican citizens staying in your country, and we're going to be there to protect them against you. And that's why I say we need to not call them illegal aliens, certainly not undocumented workers or migrants or whatever. We need to understand they are foreign citizens here in defiance of our law. And that's what the Mexican president went on to say. He said, the Mexican government will offer them legal advice to guarantee the protection they reserve. Join me in working to support and stand by our fellow citizens as they take over our country. And of course, he says Mexico does not believe in walls. Yet Obama gave $75 million to Mexico to help secure their southern border with other countries. But let's look at this in the larger context, Leanne, because at the same time this is happening and everybody is portraying Donald Trump as a bully, Donald Trump is meeting with the British Prime Minister on the very same day. What are they doing? They're pursuing a bilateral agreement. And when we look at the big fight here that's going on, it's between Donald Trump has taken on the multilateral agreements. He said, actually, and we're going to talk about this in just a moment, he wants to, it's a working paper for an executive order to take a look at the trade alliances that we have, the multilateral trade alliances. He's not opposed to trade agreements, but he wants bilateral trade agreements that can be negotiated more easily between two countries than to have a trade agreement that has to be approved by 12 countries or by 20 countries or whatever, okay? And that those multilateral trade agreements are not simply about creating trade between these countries that are involved, as much more difficult that would be. It is simply about establishing global governance. So we're going to take a look at the UN as well. Now, as the British Prime Minister is here, AFP points out the trade tops the agenda as the British Prime Minister is in the U.S. to meet Donald Trump. And of course, this is Prime Minister May. They say May is keen to start talks on a U.S.-UK free trade agreement for when Britain leaves the European Union. And of course, that's what they're looking at. They're looking for how they're going to develop the economy. And they go on to say in this article, the president's criticism of EU and NATO have caused alarm across the Atlantic. That's echoed in the article from the New York Times. British alignment with Trump threatens the European order. And here's the issue, folks. They point out, and most of this is the New York Times talking to the Council on Foreign Relations, various spokespersons from the Council on Foreign Relations in America and Europe. And of course, they're being the mouthpiece for them. They say there's crumbling pillars. And of course, those pillars that are crumbling are the TPP and the TTIP. The Trilateral Commission, the three sides of the Trilateral Commission, as we pointed out all along, Leanne, were the Union of Europe, and then Asia, and then America, joining all three of those different areas, creating a consolidation in those regions. And of course, in Asia, they just really needed China. But then also in these other areas, creating the European Union, which is now unraveling on its own. But the United States was to be the unifying force in this trilateral blueprint. And these agreements that Donald Trump has now shot down were actually the physical manifestation of these trilateral commission blueprints. And what they say here is the German foreign minister wrote in a column just this last week, he said, the old world of the 20th century is gone. Francois Hollande said, the French president said this opens a period of uncertainty, but here's the key thing. Mr. Leonard, who's with the Council on Foreign Relations, said that the British have not accepted the view that the European governments have, that their prosperity and security is based on an international architecture. In other words, the British are ready, as we saw with Brexit, they're ready to leave the globalist order. But the Europeans, the French, and especially the Germans don't. They see their prosperity as part of that international world order. And that's the key, Leanne. This isn't really about a war between Americans and Mexicans. The Mexicans have been a part of this Trilateral Commission, this globalist new world order. The building block of that was NAFTA, and then of course the North American Union, and that is what Donald Trump is going to is destroying right now. NAFTA, so we're not going to do that. The British have said we're not going to be part of the European Union, and so as those components of the global order are coming apart, that's what's at issue here. And yet the Mexican president is doubling down and saying, we're going to continue to invade your country.
Right. And of course, about 2/3 of the Trilateral Commission, they're not even U.S. citizens, but they're drafting U.S. policy. And so here we're kind of seeing this again with the Mexican president, that he's saying these are our citizens. We're going to protect them in your country, and they're going to be sending the money that they earn in your country back to Mexico. Trump's talked about that a lot.
And he can tax that.
Yes. And he said that that's another option for having Mexico pay for the wall. But what I've been seeing a lot in the media is that the new spin on what's happening with this with the 20% import tax is that, oh, well, it's going to be a 20% hike on food. And so they're going to put this panic out there that Mexico, we get so much of our food imported from Mexico that now families are going to be struggling to put food on their tables. Well, let's look at it a different way. Perhaps this means that our small farmers here, our local farmers, will be able to have jobs once again.
That's right. And people on the left need to understand that they typically understand the issues with that the advantage of growing your food locally. Locavores, they call themselves, right? And so wouldn't it be nice if we were able to grow more of our food locally and be assured of its quality rather than having this corporate food or food that is brought into our country from Mexico or from China that doesn't have the same kind of quality standards that we see.
Right.
But before we run out of time, we've just got a moment here. In the bigger scheme of things, understand that as he's talking about a 20% tax on Mexico, he's talking about cutting the UN funding by 40%. And he's coming after the UN. He understands where that is, and we need to understand where that is as well, because we've got this dictator alliance, as New American points out, the Group of 77, calling for a new world order tax, a tax for a global governance. That's what the UN is at, and Donald Trump is at the center of that, shutting that down, saying we're going to cut funding to the United Nations as well.
Right. And we're definitely seeing the globalists cringe at all of the moves Donald Trump is making. But, you know, as you said, he's absolutely going to take out the globalist legs, their agenda, one at a time.
In case you haven't heard, InfoWars has become the most influential media outlet in America. We're making freedom go viral. And now we are proud to announce a new weapon in the epic battle against the globalists. InfoWars Prime, where you can watch live high-definition feeds of The Alex Jones Show, plus exclusive insider videos from the InfoWars crew and behind-the-scenes action. Go to Infowars.com/app and download today. InfoWars Prime is available right now for your iPhone or Android. You will have access to exclusive videos that you can't see anywhere else. And that means live coverage of events and breaking news on location as it happens. You can also take advantage of amazing deals from the InfoWars store that are only available for InfoWars Prime subscribers. That's InfoWars Prime at Infowars.com/app. And if you can hear my voice, you are the resistance.